So this is going to be an extremely unusual event. The House Democrats are essentially the prosecutors. They'll call them managers, while the senators are essentially the jury. But they're all witnesses, and the trial is happening at the scene of the riot. Extremely unusual event that we are going to see unfold over the next week or so here in Washington. So today we're going to have 4 hours of debate on whether this impeachment is constitutional or not, whether it is appropriate to impeach a former president versus a sitting president. And then later today we will have a vote on that. It is expected to move forward, but it will be a narrow vote in this split 50-50 Senate. And then we're going to have spread out over 4 days, 2 days each, for arguments from both sides, the prosecutors and President Trump's side. And then we will have a question and answer period, and then finally a turning point in this process. That's when House Democrats have to decide whether they want to call witnesses. If they do, they'll have a whole round of debate and vote, and we could see this go on for many, many weeks. It's not likely they're going to do that. At this point, we expect this all to be wrapped up by perhaps early next week. Keep one thing in mind, that President Trump has been asked to testify and declined, so we are not expected to hear from him at the U.S. Senate this week or any time during this proceeding. Back to you.
Well, Jim, once things get going, what kind of arguments can we expect each side to make?
So the Democrats will argue that President Trump directly incited the riot at the Capitol, that his words led to the violence that we saw on that day. The defense team, rather, for former President Trump will argue that he did not incite anyone, that he was simply using his First Amendment right to free speech. They also will lean heavily on this argument of unconstitutionality of this whole proceeding. That will give many of these Republican senators a political out, a way to vote for acquittal while not really taking on the actual issue of who's responsible for what happened at the Capitol. We also expect President Trump's defense team to attack Democrats, to use footage of their own of Democrats supporting Black Lives Matter protests and saying that those turned violent as well. Video will be key throughout this. The Democrats will rely heavily on video from the riot, the words of the rioters saying they were there because President Trump told them to go there, and the words of President Trump himself. One thing, though, to keep in mind through this whole process is that this will look and feel at times like a legal process, but it is, in fact, purely a political process. And because of that, it's very likely that President Trump will be acquitted once again. The Democrats would need 17 senators to side with them, and in this divided Washington, that is almost impossible. Back to you.
All right, Jim. Well, thanks so much for that preview. Jim Spellman, live for us just outside the Capitol.